Hello, fellow beings of light, and welcome to episode 13 of our podcast. This is part 6 in a 12-part series entitled 6 Degrees of Soul Separation. As in, we are all 6 degrees away from... Actually, you know what? I am going to change the usual intro a bit. I think it's time. It is time to remove the term ascension from it, because I'm being called to shift away from using that term. I am being shown that the misdirection and misperception surrounding it, and the level of attachment we have developed when it comes to both, have reached a level where a shift in perspective regarding it is next to impossible, where a shift in terminology has become necessary, a renaming, a redefining. If you caught our 3-3 portal activation on Monday, feel free to laugh at those rewords. Okay, back to our intro. We are all 6 degrees away from reconverging with and expanding into not only our light body, but into the remembrance of the 6 levels of soul aspects and corresponding consciousness levels that they were separated into. I added a bit more there, a nod to things to come to be shared. Maybe some of it today, but more likely spread out over time. Regardless of what we do or do not get into today, take in those changes I made for a moment. Consider what they mean to you, with whether they resonate or feel aligned in some way, because they are pretty big changes. As usual, it's fitting that they are. What will be shared today will touch on a lot of big things, not only for my own personal journey and my missions, but for all of us collectively, both below and above. And side note, because of this, I want to once again remind all of you to remain open, to take in what resonates and is in alignment for you now, and let go of what does not, either completely for good or for a later point in time when it does resonate and is in alignment. And I'm reminding you of this because it is that big. It is a lot, and it won't be meant for a lot of people. Not right now. Not yet, anyway. This right here will be the starting point, the beginning of an unfolding, a witnessing of all that has been coming through for me over the last 2 months and longer. Oh, I can already see some of you at the end of this going, wait, this is just the beginning? There's more than this? Well, to answer your question in advance, yeah, there is a lot more. It gets even bigger than what I will share today. And know that this will also be a vulnerable episode, a vulnerable part in this series and in my journey, not only for myself, but for who I will be sharing with you today as well. So far in this series, we have focused on the fellow soul aspects to separate from my light body. Today, however, we will be focusing on my light body, Leora. Now, some of you may be scratching your head here because a big part of that misdirection and misperception surrounding the term ascension involves the perceived limitation that you have to ascend into them in order to connect with your light body, to communicate with them, to interact with them, and create with them. You don't. And I'm not going to get into the why or how or any of that behind that statement today because it's not necessary. It is enough that you will be witnessing and experiencing me doing all of those things with my own light body today. So, I want to start at the beginning with what I knew and had received when it comes to Leora before everything that has come in and expanded upon it in a way that is beyond quantifying over the last 2 months. And that is because doing so is in keeping with how she has unfolded for me, the story of my journey, and also in keeping with a reoccurring theme that has arose over and over when it comes to her. Leora, and through her, myself and my fellow soul aspects to separate from her, we have all been shielded from certain knowledge and at the same time had blocks put in place in terms of other knowledge that needed or needs to be remembered at a specific time or milestone in our journey. And while the human part of me initially wanted to protest, to shout, when it comes to what felt like further interference with my sovereignty, with my ability to choose, with the human experience I was intended to have as part of this experiment that is our human experience. I think I get it now, in light of the big things that we will be getting into shortly. It was necessary for us to be shielded, to be blocked, because what we are and what was and is being asked of us, our missions, all or most of it requires being kept in the dark about what was going on above after our separation. It required being able to maintain an image and understanding of those above and of the experiment itself that would maintain our innocence, our faith in them and it, hope, and more. It required us to not be affected, distracted, deluded by what came to pass before, during, and after the separation for the experiment. It required remaining neutral, pure almost. That's the best way I can describe it right now. Okay, the beginning, the unfolding. I have shared bits and pieces of this in this series and likely beyond it. So some of it may seem familiar, but it is important to start here. Leora is an Andromedan child around the age of 7. She possesses unique and heightened gifts, the ability to observe everything around her, to absorb it and not predict the future, but rather to see and assess all probable futures, outcomes across what we would consider timelines and dimensions, both of which did not exist did not exist at all prior to the actual separation of soul aspects from light bodies to incarnate on Earth for the experiment. She was among 13 children total that were collected by the Council of 12, by Isis specifically, during the development of the experiment that would become our human experience, all of which had unique and heightened gifts like her. She was taken from her family and spent time among each of the 12 races, observing them, absorbing them, seeing and assessing probable futures for the experiment, and reporting them back to the Council of 12. I didn't know at the time what form that reporting took. I do now, though, and we will get into that. Let's finish up with the beginning, though. From the bits and pieces I was receiving back then, I was under the impression, and perhaps Leora was as well, that she made a sovereign choice when the time for the experiment and separation arrived, a choice to no longer be used for her abilities, a choice to go against her parents' wishes and to join those light bodies who were separating, to become a part of the experiment herself. That's a big choice for a small child. As my time with Leora, with my fellow soul aspects to separate from her, and with members of my team associated with her and us, continued on in my Akashic records and even outside of them, it became very clear that there was interference that occurred during her separation and in the trajectory our soul aspects took. I can't speak as to the full form that interference took for the other 5. Only myself. Only that it resulted in us being held back, incarnated on Earth over time at designated points in time, that it resulted in my soul aspect, the 6th to separate and incarnate, being last and in this specific time period for the first time. As in, I don't possess any past lives. This is literally my soul aspect's first rodeo on Earth. I also knew that I was not the only one, that there were other light bodies whose separation was interfered with, other sets of 6 soul aspects who had their trajectory and placement across timelines and dimensions interfered with other sixth soul aspects who have or will arrive on Earth for the first time now in the present. I'm going to mention here that I now believe that those other light bodies and separated soul aspects, those other sixth soul aspects in their first rodeo, that they are the other 12 children that were collected by the Council of 12 during the development of the experiment. I'm not 100% sure of that yet, that there isn't more beyond us that had that same experience. I just know what I am meant to know right now, that the 13 collected children, the 13 used children, all had the same interference. I know a lot more about them as well, but we will get to that. I just wanted to drop this part in here because it is where it fits, and I also don't want to forget to mention it later. Okay, let's fast forward to what I know now, what has been unfolding, what I have been receiving, and what has been evolving over the last 2 months, and beyond it a bit, back 4 months or so, although I wasn't able to unlock or understand what I was receiving back then until this last 2 months. My knowledge now is far more than it was 4 months ago. Hell, it's far more than it was about a month ago and even 2 weeks ago when I shared initial knowledge and our name change and mission changes with all of you. That's how much it's been evolving. And that's how divine timing works, folks. Especially when you are an intentionally shielded and blocked Andromedan child and a separated soul aspect of her, apparently. Actually, before we get into it, Leora and I believe all of our inner children they're wanting to treat what comes next like story time, for all of us to envision ourselves sitting in a circle with our inner children on our laps or next to us, open to receiving. So if you would like to join me in envisioning that, wherever you are and whenever you might be listening, go ahead and do so, and I will hold open the space necessary for it. Okay. We all know, to some extent, that Source separated into the Divine Father and Mother, or what we know more as the Divine Masculine and the Divine Feminine. The three of which, if you don't already know, make up the true Trinity, the first separation and expression of polarity, a topic we have been getting into pretty deep and heavily over the last week or so. Source is the center point, the heart center, if we are using us as an example. And the Masculine and feminine are the opposing extremes emanating upwards and downwards from it. It should be kind of obvious, but the masculine emanates upwards to what we would see as the mind, and the feminine emanates downwards to what we would see as the emotions, the root, the womb, however you want to put it. They are not separate. They are opposing extremes, opposing poles of the exact same frequency, meeting in the middle, balancing out at source, at the heart center. Or at least they were and are intended to be. But as separation has been proven to do over and over and over again, both above and down here on earth, it fosters perceptions of duality, perceptions of actual separation, differences, one or the other thinking, and an inability to be both at the same time when the opposite is true. I am getting a bit off track, but felt called to share this here as it was actually something that clicked for me last night during a discussion on polarity with a fellow lightworker. Something that was channeled through me during it, this part about the divine feminine and masculine being the same thing, polarity. And both of us made sure I wrote it down because we knew it was big, that it was something important in the context of my discussions on polarity, my call for polarity, and all of this stuff going on. It may or may not be important to this episode beyond what I am about to say. That's okay, though, not to worry. If it isn't important right now, I will still definitely be getting into it as we move forward in these episodes and our offerings, the book and the database I've been called to write, and more. I will get to it. What is important to this episode is degrees of separation. Similar to how we are all 1 to 6 degrees from our light body, 1 to 6 levels of consciousness from our light body, 6 degrees away from reconverging with our light body, from making them whole again. The divine father and mother, masculine and feminine, are 1 degree away from source. They created the Council of 12, half masculine, half feminine, who are 2 degrees away from source. And they created the 12 races that are 3 degrees away from source. Although I kind of believe there are actually 13. And so on and so on and so on. Each level fitting polarity, only expanding how many points along the new frequency exist, below or above the center point, the balance point. Now, it might feel like I'm getting off track again. I'm not. I'm getting there right now. Leora and the other 12 children gathered, half masculine and half feminine, the 13. They are a new set of pieces, of aspects, broken off directly from the Divine Father and Mother, as the Council of 12 was. They are 1 degree away from the Divine Father and Mother and 2 degrees away from source. and thus they possess knowledge, abilities, and more from them that are undiluted by further degrees of separation from source. Hence the unique and heightened abilities, I believe. And while it's not quite relevant yet, if you aren't catching where this will ultimately lead in the future, those 12 children and a 13th neutral androgynous child by the name of Leora will serve as a new council or a replacement council to the original 12. They were created, separated, in preparation for the impending experiment the Divine Father and Mother saw evolving from their original Council of 12. And although I can't yet speak to how they knew it would be necessary, how they knew that the experiment would be interfered with, misused in a way that would prompt them to interfere first by creating these 13. I'm going to go ahead and guess, though, that the Divine Mother or the Divine Father possess the same abilities that Leora does to see and assess probable futures, outcomes, across what we would consider timelines and dimensions, even though they didn't exist yet. Let's just leave it at that and move on to how that decision made by them unfolded. These 13 pieces, aspects of the Divine Father and Mother, were spread out, incarnated into families among each of the 12 races, or maybe 13. I am still a bit confused about whether there were 2 on Andromeda or if there was a 13th race. But they are telling me that is still not important, still not need to know at this moment. So we're going to leave that alone. Okay? They were born into their respective families like any other galactic child would be, no one knowing who or what they truly were. And when the time for the development of the experiment finally came around, they were collected by the council, by Isis, who was very much aware of what was to come and also not in agreement with how it was going to unfold. And once they were collected, they were used in the development of it. I can't speak for the other 12 as to what they contributed to the development. Not yet, anyway. I can speak for the 13th, though, for Leora. Her role, as I said earlier, was spending time among each of the 12 races, observing them, absorbing them, seeing and assessing probable futures for the experiment, and reporting them back to the Council of 12. And this is where we get to the form that reporting took, because I now know what that form was and have actually received confirmation through sessions with other lightworkers and channels regarding it. What Leora created from the probabilities she saw and absorbed were probable sets of codes, templates, blueprints that could be used for the experiment, for the overall experiment itself, for the separation of light bodies into soul aspects, and for the reconvergence of soul aspects into their light bodies upon completion. One of those sets was selected and used for all of those things, but not in their original state, not in their pure form as created by Leora. They were tampered with, interfered with by a majority of the Council of 12 before being set into motion. I'm not going to get into too much of the how or why of that now either. Not yet. It's not the time. All of it will unfold when it's meant to. And that will likely be another vulnerable day or set of days for myself and Leora. All I will say regarding it right now is that it was the result of duality, the inherent effect of separation. The Council of 12, or most of them, setting themselves above others in terms of who had access to the intended results of the experiment first, and who got credit for those results. Once the edited codes, templates, and blueprints were in place, the 13 children continued to be used by the council. They created 13 pillars, gateways, portals of and through them. The 12 council members each claimed a pillar corresponding to the race that they created. Some kind of ceremony was held that created the gateways, that placed a piece of a council member within a child and created a connection between each of them through that would allow the council member to communicate with and receive from them during the experiment and vice versa. Now, if that screams out that they didn't trust each other to you, you'd probably be right, because it would make so much more sense to me, anyway, to combine them, to pull that resource and share it, than to divide and hoard these children that resource individually. After the ceremonies, they were sent into a state of inertia and separated into soul aspects, just like every other light body who volunteered to join the experiment. The 13th, the creator and holder of all of the probable sets of codes, templates, and blueprints, Leora, was once again, as she was with the Divine Father and Mother, defined as neutral. She was placed on a pillar as well, but endured a different ritual than the other 12 pillars, and she was intended to remain there, unseparated, as a vault of those probable sets of codes, templates, and blueprints sort of as a failsafe in case the experiment went wrong or when the council was ready to finally share the intended results fully with all. That is clearly not what happened, though. I mean, I'm here, right? Incarnated in a human body on Earth. This would be where that knowledge I have of Isis interfering comes in. Just the interference is a little different than I originally saw it as. She initiated a second ceremony, placed a piece of herself within Leora, and sent her into a state of inertia and separated soul aspects like the others. This is where the majority of the story, this unfolding, ends for Leora. Like all light bodies who separated for incarnation on Earth, she is still stuck in a state of inertia, frozen in time as a 7-year-old child. But as I became aware of recently, she is still very much aware and conscious of what is going on around her. They all are. But those around them, their families and beyond, they aren't aware that these light bodies are conscious and aware. They cannot communicate with them. They cannot share with them. These light bodies can't. They can only connect with and communicate with us, their separated soul aspects. Again, it is important to point out that this ongoing state over millions and billions of years, it was and is intentional, a choice made by the Council of 12, a consequence of the interference with the original codes, templates, and blueprints. Hence, myself and the other 12, if I'm able to find and connect with them, being given the mission of repairing or replacing the tampered, the changed codes, templates, and blueprints, of returning the experiment to what it was originally intended to be, for the benefit and reconvergence of all, of returning all of our soul aspects to our light bodies so that they can awaken, so that they can reclaim and continue living their lives. That was a lot, wasn't it? I warned you it would be. And all of it, it is merely the tip of the iceberg of what I have been receiving. More will come, more will unravel over time. For now, I believe our story time is done. But I'm being called to have us remain within the circle with our inner children for a bit longer. And I am being called to be silent and allow Leora to speak, to allow her to unfold something for all of you in terms of your own light body. Not a full connection, not full communication, as that would require more time and work, but rather, what is it? A spark of a connection between you and your light body, a spark that will allow you to feel their presence and for them to feel yours, a spark to let them know that they are seen, that the state that they are in is seen, and a spark to give them hope that aid is coming, that they will reawaken. Whew, that is a beautiful gift for her to give them, as well as to you, even if it is only temporary, momentary. I hope that you will choose to accept it. If you are open to receiving that gift, to allowing Leora and myself to enter your energy field and that of your light bodies, whenever you may be listening and wherever you and they may be, to allow Leora to provide that gift and myself the ability to hold space for it. Simply say yes, either out loud or within your mind. Okay, I am not getting from her that we need to jump through the hoops of entering a meditation or a journey. Instead, all that you need to do is close your eyes, focus on your breathing, and be open to what comes through as she does her thing. Let's go ahead and begin. Ariu sharas karakas karakate. Ariu sarabakas karakatis karakati. Arahu sarabakas karakatiska. Areu sarabakas karakarosh karakatis karakati. Ariu sarabagas karakatis karakpukush karakati. Ariu salama kashkate. Ariu sharabagas karakate. Areu sarakash karakate. Tush karabakaris karakush karakadis karakati. Ariu sarabakash karakatis karakate. Aru sarakadis karakate. Aru hari sarabakosh karakate. Ariu sarabagas karakate. Ariu sharakadis karakate ska. Ariu sarabaka. Ari shara sarabakosh karakate karakate. Arihu sharabakat karakatishka. Arehu sarabakas karakate. Diru sharagaras karakatis karakatis karakati. Arihu sharabaka. Abash karakata. Arihu sharabakas karakatis karakatis karakati. Karu Sharabakush karakate. Tarish Kurapakash Katakate, Adi Usharakadis Karakates Karakate, Ari Usanamakas Katakati, Ari Usarakadis Karakate, Ari Usarapakush Katakatiska, Hari Usanamakash Katakatis Karakatia. Happy Husharakades Karakatis Karakush Karakati. Hari Husanamakas Karakate. Ari Husarakadis Karakatis Karakatis Karakati. Hari Hushanamakas Karakades Karakarush Karakati. Hari Urusharabaka. Hari Hushanamakas Karakati. Ushara. Ushara, Ushara, Abri, Usarakash, Katakate, Skatakarush, Katakati, Puri, Hari, Ushara, Pakash, Katakati, Ushara, Pakati, Skatakar, Karash, Katakati, Skatakatush, Kata, Uri, Shushara, Makaresh, Katakati, Skatakati, Hari, Ushara, Pakash, Katakati, Usharakate, Hari, Hari, Hari. Amishurshkarakate. She is complete. Oh. Thank you for joining us today, especially if you remained open and stuck with us to the end. An emotional end, I'll say. I hope that you were able to receive the gift that Leora offered, that you were able to sense the temporary connection between you and your light body, that you were able to sense not only the message that Leora conveyed to your light bodies to give them hope, but that you were able to sense a response from them to being seen, to being understood, to being given the message that she gave. Because I know how powerful and emotional it was for me when Leora shared her state with me and was seen and understood for the first time. And I can feel it right now from all of your light bodies. I'm going to go ahead and end this episode here. There will be a second podcast this week, our energy update for the spring season. Some new themes and things we'll be working on. And as long as my cold stays on its departing path, I should have a distance Reiki session released for you as well over the weekend. Get some rest. Allow the knowledge and experience shared here today to sink in. And I don't know, if you feel called to share or connect with me, or even with Leora or one of my other fellow soul aspects, feel free to do so. It is okay to do so. It is welcomed in the comments, through email, Jessa, Jessa, at blueprintreclamationproject.com, or even through our website, blueprintreclamationproject.com. I've never asked that before, but I'm being called to now. So know that if you are called to do so, reach out in whatever way you are called to. That's all, guys. Arish